Tombstone had a way of holding its breath when death walked through it. And on that October morning, the air felt thin, stretched tight like rawhide ready to snap. Luke Calder had ridden all night from the Dragoons, his horse lathered white, though he barely remembered mounting it. A man didn't think straight when something important went missing. And Luke Calder had lost the only thing a gunslinger wasn't supposed to lose, his soul, or whatever peace passed for one after years of killing for money and whiskey. He tried to tell himself she'd tricked him, that the firelight, the desert wind, the chanting echoing from those hidden canyons had made him foolish. He'd sworn no woman could unmake him, not after all the blood and dust he'd lived through. But Red Knife hadn't been any ordinary woman. The first time he saw her, she stood on a ridge under a dying sun, face painted black, hair braided with a feather that glowed like a sliver of dawn. She watched him the way a hawk watches a rabbit, curious, patient, already knowing the ending. He'd chased her as if she were a bounty, though no one had hired him. Something in him felt pulled, drawn across the desert. When he finally found her camp tucked between red boulders and juniper shadows, he told himself he would take what he wanted and ride on. But the firelight carved strange shapes across the stones, and there was a sound in the wind like whispering voices. And she moved with the calm certainty of someone who understood the world's hidden gears. She touched his chest once lightly, and everything inside him seemed to fall out of place. He didn't remember sleeping, only waking alone with a raw ache under his ribs and the cold sense that something vital had slipped from him while he was too entranced to care. The silver concho necklace he'd given her, cheap but sentimental, was gone. And so was she. Men in camp said he looked pale, said his shadow seemed strange. But Luke saddled up and rode without answering. A man didn't admit to losing something he couldn't name. When he reached Tombstone, the street was crowded for the hour, but the noise dropped as folks saw the way he dismounted, slow, stiff, eyes hollow. He walked down Allen Street like he was pushing through mud. The buildings leaned tall on both sides, throwing long bars of shadow across the dust. And at the far end, where the noon sun sat directly above the rooftops, she waited. Red Knife stood as if she'd stepped straight out of last night's dream, one feather in her braid, the silver necklace dangling from her fingers, stained dark. The wind teased the fringe of her deerskin dress. Though Luke couldn't feel any wind at all, he told himself he wasn't afraid, told himself she was flesh and blood like any other. But the closer he stepped, the heavier the air grew, until each breath rasped through him like he was inhaling smoke. Her eyes tracked him, soft but unblinking, not cruel, not kind, just certain. He spat dust and snarled at her to give it back. His voice came out cracked, weaker than he meant, and it angered him. She didn't answer, only opened her hand, palm upward. Inside lay something that shouldn't have existed outside a man's chest. Hard, dry, dark, yet twitching faintly like a dying moth beating its wings. He knew it instantly. Recognition slammed through him like a bullet. His knees almost buckled. Folks on the boardwalk stared, but none stepped forward. Even the horses tied out front shifted uneasily, ears pinned back. The town clock struck noon, a slow metallic chime rolling through the heat, and as it rang, Luke saw a strange ripple shiver across the dust. The shadows cast by men, wagons, and hitching posts unlatched themselves like strips of wet cloth. They slid along the ground toward her, silent, drawn as if obeying a command older than the desert. Luke's hand jerked to his holster. Habit, fear, pride. The gun cleared leather fast. He hadn't lost that. But when he cocked the hammer, it clicked on an empty chamber. He froze. He knew damn well he'd loaded before leaving camp. His heartbeat, or what had been his heartbeat, echoed from the thing in her hand instead. He looked into her face. She whispered words he felt more than heard, that he'd made a bargain without knowing it, that one night in the firelight had cost him the part of himself that still believed he could outrun his past, that today she was here only to collect what remained. She didn't raise a weapon, didn't move. She didn't have to. Luke's breath stopped. His throat clenched. The world dimmed. His boots slipped on the dust as if the ground under him had turned to smoke. He reached for his chest, but his hand passed through empty air. His horse reared and tore free of its reins, bolting down the street in blind terror. Luke's body crumpled like dry parchment, hitting the ground with a dull thud. His eyes stared wide, already fading, already hollow. Bits of him, skin, dust, shadow, peeled away, scattering into the hot afternoon breeze. Red Knife closed her hand gently around the thing that had once been Luke Calder's heart. Then she turned and walked away, her own shadow rising smooth and whole behind her, while every other shadow in Tombstone crept after her like loyal companions returning to their rightful owner. By the time the townsfolk dared to breathe again, nothing remained of Luke but dust mixing with the street he thought he owned.